There's an old quotation that says the worth of a person is not necessarily determined only by what they do on their jobs, but the worth of a person is determined by how they utilize their position to affect, improve and influence the entire community. I'm so happy today to be interviewing an individual whose activities go well beyond their day-to-day job and operations. And that person is none other than Mrs. Erica Woodford. And she has initiated a project that's dynamic and phenomenal. But before we talk about the Enslaved Peoples Project, I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know. I'm Alex Habersham, and the name of this show is A Call to Action, and our interviewee today is Miss Erica Woodford. And I'm just so amazed at not only this initiative that we're going to talk mostly about today, but also her involvement in the community, because that's what really determines a public servant's worth, really, and she is a public servant. But not only a public servant, but those of us who are in business and got positions throughout the community, I think that she bespeaks of how we are supposed to be involved in the community and do things that will help to educate and improve the community. So thank you for coming on, Ms. Woodford. And let's start out by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mr. Habersham. It is an honor to be on such a prestigious show as this, A Call to Action, which is what we all need to do. There needs to be a call and a response. And so I am responding today for the people. I am here, the people's clerk, in my office, and I'm just excited to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
So
sir.
give us a background on Miss Erica. Talk a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am from a lovely city called Macon, Georgia. I was born here, raised here, educated here. I went to, we'll just start with middle school, Appling Middle School, the Northeast High School, East Side Out Loud. I'm sure you know that. And then I went to college at Mercer University right here in Macon, where I studied African American Studies and Political Science as a double major, and I minored in Spanish. After that, I went to law school at Cumberland School of Law, Sanford University in Birmingham, Alabama, practiced law here in my community for about 8 years, I believe. And after that, I was appointed to the judiciary. So I served as a civil court judge and magistrate here in Bibb County Civil and Magistrate Court. And after that, I decided to run for the office of Superior Court Clerk. And this is my third term as clerk. So again, I'm from Macon. My family's here, mom and dad, Lawsy and Bessie Woodford, my children. So I am a product of Macon and Bibb County, Georgia, and happy to be here representing the people and working for the citizens of this community.
Well, we're happy to have you. And we're going to talk primarily about the Enslaved Peoples Project. And I thought it was kind of interesting how you just kind of came up on that. But sometimes we come up on things and we don't do anything about it. Sometimes we come up and discover things and we just kind of put it in the archives and not do anything about it. Sometimes when we come across information that may be of benefit to the community and to other people and to our families and to our history, we don't do anything about it. But lo and behold, that's not what you did. So just kind of give us that story of how you happen up, if you please,
yes,
on
sir.
The information for this exhibit.
So I was elected in 2012 and I took office in 2013. So when I took office, of course, I was learning the lay of the land, figuring out all the odds and ends of the office. If anyone has been in this courthouse, there are a lot of nooks and crannies. It's almost like a maze in here. And so one day I was in our mezzanine. We have a vault and a mezzanine, which is the upstairs area. Some of our staff like to call it the catwalk. So I was upstairs in the mezzanine and, just so happened to have a few minutes of downtime. And I saw these very old books. So I decided to pull down one of the deed books. I opened the deed book and I proceeded to read this old cursive writing. And what I read, well, I'll just tell you what I read. In the deed book, mind you, where we're selling property, your house, your farm, your land. I opened the book and I saw an entry that said, I, Alexander Bryan, am selling the following Negro girl named Harriet, age
Wow.
11, fair complexion, long straight hair, warranted to be sound and well for $225. And if
Wow.
you can imagine, I'm sure you feel chills now. It gave me chills. I had goosebumps, and it was just, an amazing discovery, or maybe a rediscovery, if you will, of the records that we have here. And so if you imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, that this is our bicentennial year.
Yes.
Bibb County was founded in 1823. 190 years later, in 2013, the first African American clerk of Superior Court found records of people being enslaved right here in Bibb County, including where the first clerk of court owned humans as slaves. So it was such a full circle experience. And, when I found these records, I had to go downstairs and grab the chief deputy clerk, Stephanie Woods Miller, and show her the records that I found. And of course, she was amazed and awestruck and shocked as well. And so, we sort of looked at a few of the books and saw that this was not an isolated entry, that there were several entries in the books of humans being sold as slaves. And if we fast forward a few months, I was having lunch with a dear friend, Dr. Chester Fontenot, over at Mercer University. So we were downtown just having lunch. He was asking me how it's going in office, and I told him about the discovery, and he was shocked and awestruck. And so, my dilemma was that, we need to find a way to preserve and protect these records as well as promote them. And Dr. Fontenot and I, joined with Stephanie, and we created this dream team. So it was me, Stephanie, Dr. Fontenot, and some Mercer librarians, Adam, and the other Stephanie, as we call her. And so we came up with a plan on the best way to capture this information, and catalog what we have. So Dr. Fontenot and his team found some grants through research that reaches out. And we got our first set of interns, Addison and Tiffany, and they came in, I want to say this was maybe around 2018 during the summer. And the grant gave them the opportunity to work here at the office. And then they were able to get a stipend to cover their housing expenses and food. So after the summer was over, I hired them in the office. So ever since that time, COVID notwithstanding, we've had at least 2 interns in the office working on this project year round. So, that's the long and short of, how I found the records and the formation of the dream team. And so since we've had our interns, we've had some community volunteers, we found or discovered that out of the 18 volumes, the first 18 volumes of deed books and chattel mortgages, we have close to 1,000 entries, so 980 deeds conveying humans as slaves.
Wow.
I've seen one deed that sold 1/2 interest in a Black man. I saw another deed where A lady was selling a 6-month-old baby to repent for her vile sins, for falling for the lustful wiles, I guess, of a Black man. So she had a little mulatto baby and she had to sell it. I've seen all sorts of records. Harry at age 11, I've seen records where, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 humans were being sold along with a brick house, a horse and buggy. So we have these records. It's an amazing discovery, and we just need to share this with the community at large. I believe this is probably the only government or court funded, started, motivated project like this in the country. Now, that's my belief. You're the journalist. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But, I've seen genealogists and historic societies and that sort of thing doing research, but I have not seen a clerk's office or a records keeper, if you will, producing the records for the public. And speaking of these records, we've scanned in all of the records. So, I use my budget strategically to fund scanning all of our records, our property records from 1823 to present. So included in those are the close to 1,000 records of humans being sold.
Wow. I mean, that is so important. And as you know, I'm intimately involved in the bicentennial, being the co-chair of the bicentennial commission. And I certainly will make this a part, because what we are trying to do with the bicentennial is discover our history and highlight it and acknowledge it, and then work toward a more harmonious future. That's a part of the mission of the bicentennial. So that is so significant from all kinds of perspective, because I understand what they mean when they say lest we forget, and that needs not to be forgotten. I'll tell you why. I think that the role that Negroes, since that's what they were called back then, if that the role that Negroes have played in the development and the history and the advancement of our country is unappreciated and overlooked. And we have played a major and a significant and a measurable role in the advancement of our country. Now, when you say a deed book, that means that it was a sale.
Exactly.
And that means that somebody made some money off of that sale. So I just think it's important, not from a mean perspective, but just from a historical and a fair perspective, that this information is given to the public. So I applaud you and Dr. Chester.
Yes, sir.
Who helped you for this. And then I'm going to talk more about how, I know that you're going to do something to make this print. We're going to make it a part of the bicentennial. I haven't decided how, but I will. And
Well, that would be great, Mr. Habersham. And I also want to just state, when we're speaking about the bicentennial, I am actually hosting a bicentennial ball on September 23rd, 2023, which is the most auspicious date to celebrate our 200 years. And this ball is a black tie event open to the entire community, and it is a free event. So it's not just for those, who are so fancy or whatever so special. Is for everybody, because we're all special in this community. And just you mentioned that African Americans, Negroes, coloreds, whatever the name, throughout the years were so significant in our country. But just to give you an idea of how significant my ancestors, your ancestors, our ancestors were in this community. The first mayor of Macon got $10,000. The General Assembly granted him $10,000 so that he could hire a clerk, like the county clerk, as well as purchase a human, an enslaved person to work for him, personal servant or whatever in that capacity. Now, one of our former mayors, John Gresham, and you may remember that name from the 1842 end because he owned that home. He owned some slaves. So he owned humans as slaves. And you can also find him as a witness on some of these documents in our records. The railroad leased humans to build the railroad. And as
Wow.
we know, Macon is right here in the heart of Georgia and in the heart of interstate commerce, if you will. So, we have 16, we have 80, we have 75, and I guess we had dirt roads back then. I don't know what they were called, but people came from all around, and you can see that in these records from various counties to purchase humans. So we were a major commerce hub back then, and we are now. People still come from surrounding counties to go shopping, to eat, play, stay, whatever. And it was the same back then. The county or the city government owned humans to do road work. So that's part of the significance of the Black, brown people who were here, early on in the early 1800s.
And that explains the role that these individuals played in the advancement, development, and progress of our community. My business is on Cotton Avenue, and it's my understanding that that Black folk laid bricks, brick by brick, to make it a paved street. So I just want to acknowledge, in a fair way, the role that African Americans have played, not only in the development and advancement of Macon, Georgia, but it also applies to these United States of America. So, at this vault, and I want to make sure that we discuss making that event sanctioned event of the bicentennial. I meant to mention that to you earlier, so I'll talk to you about it later.
Okay.
So is this project going to be on? What have you done with it? I know that you've had it in a couple of places, and what kind of reaction and responses have you received from it?
Okay, counselor, that's a compound question, so I'll try to do my best to answer both. What have I done with it? So again, we have scanned in all the documents. So they are on our searchable, well, not searchable, they are on our public access site. So we have a public site called eSearch where you can go online and you can search our property records. So if you wanted to know about your deed, you can go in and you can type in, your name, and it'll pull up deeds to your home. Well, on that website, there is a historical tab. If you click the historical tab, then you'll be able to click a drop down and select the book and page number, whatever you'd like to see. So all of these old books, our historic books, are under the historical tab, and you can click the book and you can basically start flipping the pages of that virtual book.
Wow.
Will, because all of the documents, all the books are scanned in. So page 1 might be 123 Main Street, and page 2 might be Harriet, and page 3 might be the Napiers selling 50 humans as slaves, which I'm sure you've driven down Napier Avenue.
Yes.
Don't know if there's any correlation between the Napier Avenue and the Napiers in our books, but I digress. So you can go on this site. It's not searchable per se, but it's like pulling a book off the shelf and just flipping through the pages. You'll select from the drop down whichever book you'd like to look at and just flip through. So that's one thing that we've done. Another thing that we've done is we have utilized our vendor cot systems, and we have basically tailor-made a system called Record Room, where you can go in, and Record Room will have strictly these records of enslaved people being sold, as well as any ancillary records. So for example, all of those 980 deeds have been extracted from the 18 volumes. They've been extracted and placed in this record room, this digital platform. And so you will be able to search these records. So you'll type in a name. If you type in Harriet, you'll pull up any deed that has Harriet in it. If you type in, whatever name or word, if you type in John Gresham, then you'll find the deeds where he purchased, so where he was the grantee, where he sold, meaning grantor, or whether he was a witness, because we've indexed the data in such a way that you can do multiple searches. Also, our historical preservation clerk, Miss Julie Grimm, has found other documentation from the library, the state archives, wherever she could find. So for example, if there was a John Gresham deed and there happened to be a public sale on the courthouse square, maybe she pulled that newspaper article. So you'll also be able to see that the article showing that we'll have a public auction on April 3rd, 1823, or whatever date.
Yeah.
So she's pulled other details, also maybe wills. So if when you die, you pass your property along to your family members or your friends. So she may have found a will or an inventory from a will showing that, Sam owned 15 Negroes and list them out and their value.
Wow.
And that he passed those to his wife when he died. But of course, his wife then had to have her brother to be her guardian because she was too delicate to know how to handle business, of course.
Yeah.
So women could not handle their own property or transactions. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things that I've done with the project, with the records. So that searchable platform, we're actually rolling out the end of this month. So probably by the time this airs, you'll be able to go on the site and search at least the first 300 records. We don't have all of them in yet because we do a double-blind verification. So the students looked at the books and extracted the data. Then one of my staff members looked at the data, the books, to compare and correct. And then someone else looked at it. So we need to make sure that it's accurate because we're still governing ourselves under Georgia indexing standards, which are the standards that we index real estate documents. So, we're making sure to be very careful with every document to read every word. And these are old cursive words, and writing is a unique art form. So we're extracting the data. So we have about 300 that we have basically double, triple verified that are ready to be consumed by the public, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you also asked, part two of the question was, how has it been received, I believe, or what kind of feedback have we received? So I've received positive feedback from the people and places that I've gone. I've received positive feedback. No one has, I guess, been audacious enough to say this is a bad thing, at least not to my face. And, I heard someone, I was speaking with an educator about, maybe we can bring some students over. And I was told that educators cannot show or teach or discuss anything that's controversial. I said, well, this isn't controversy. These are just records. These are just records of our shared history. And so, the history of our community and really the history of the world. So, I've heard at that time that this could be controversial, but I disagree. I feel like this is a catalyst for conversation. It's something that we can all discuss, whether we're Black, white, blue, green, purple. whether we're from Macon, whether we're from Atlanta, Florida, Oregon, wherever we're from, we can discuss these historical documents, and we can use this as a way to grow together, to become better, and, to have a brighter future.
That ties in with the mission of the bicentennial, is to promote a harmonious future. And you can't promote a harmonious future without acknowledging the good things and the bad things of the past. And I said it publicly, and I know it's publicly.
Yes,
So
sir.
let me ask you a question. And I won't ask a compound question this time.
Yes, sir. I'll try to answer your question, however you phrase it.
Okay. Are there any possibility of tracing, like relatives? I mean, have there been any instances? Because I only heard you mention, Sally, first names. And I'm just curious as it relates, is it at all traceable? Because I'm sure that some of those people who are in those deed books, some of the relatives of those people who are in those deed books of 1823 are living in Macon, Georgia in 2023. So is there any, well, I know this isn't ancestry, but is there any way to kind of track, or has anybody been able to track and or identify any of their relatives?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So this is just another tool that genealogists can use. And I'm sure you know Miss Brenda Sutton Williams from around the Middle Georgia area. She's used these records. Miss Stephanie Woods Miller has used these records for her husband's family and surprisingly for some of her own family. So there is a way that you can trace back, but it takes multiple levels of attack. You have to maybe do your DNA, maybe check the library, your family Bibles, and you have to work your way back from today all the way back. So including the census, so like the 1870 census, if you know your grandparents' names and your great-grandparents' names and your great-great-grandparents, maybe through a death record or birth record, then you can use the census as well. And for example, I looked up my fifth great grandfather, and I found in the 1870 census in Twiggs County that Sandy Nash was listed on the census, Black male, right under, I forget the Nash name, but it was a white male. So, and when you do the census, you're going neighbor by neighbor, house by house, closest vicinity. And so there was a white Nash, and then there was Sandy Nash, my fifth great grandfather, who was Black. And he lived right next to the white Nash. So I'm assuming that he or his family were either formerly enslaved, or some of their relatives were enslaved, because they have the same last name and they're basically living on the same property. So maybe he was a sharecropper, worked on the farm of Sandy Nash. The only downside is that in Twiggs County, I can't look at these deed records because their courthouse was either burned or flooded. I forget which one, but their records were destroyed, I want to say around 1915. But if that was a Bibb County census record, then I could then look in the deed book for Nash, for any Nash buying or selling, and see if he purchased purchased a human named Sandy. And that would be my Sandy Nash.
Wow. Okay, now let me ask you a question. You just created a massive amount of curiosity in me, something I should have but have never thought about. So, what are you telling me about last names for Black folks? Are you telling me something about last names for Black folks that's from a permanent and a concrete and a traditional and a historical perspective?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Haversham. Are you telling me?
Let's search the records, Mr. Haversham, and see if there were any transactions in our deed books.
It may not be my folk from Louisville, so you might not find them in Bibb County. But
Well, it might be
yeah,
in
say,
Louisville.
from a general perspective, so you mean there's a real lack of identification for us from our last name, a true heritage identification?
Exactly, because in these books, in some of the records, it has, multiple names. So I'm selling the following Negroes: Winnie, John, Beck, and Rose. Now, when the person who purchased Winnie, John, Beck, and Rose, when they pass away and give or either sell those humans to someone else, Winnie, John, Beck, and Rose will either have his last name or the next owner's last name. So you
Wow.
can also have different last names in a family, because if the family was separated and sold to two different families, then you might have the Smiths over here and the Browns over here. So now we have, the last name Brown for this branch and the last name Smith.
And
And also,
that could be my brother. You know what I'm saying? That could have been my brother, and then all of a sudden I assumed the name of Brown, and then if my brother went to the Smiths, wow.
exactly. And
Wow.
also after emancipation and after the abolition of slavery, then some of the newly freed people created their own name because you didn't have a last name. So you either took the familiar last name, which by familiar, you could actually have some familial relationship to that family, but that's a different story. So you either took that familiar last name or you created your own.
Wow. And I guess that's why ancestry is important. I mean, DNA is important
Exactly.
because it's traceable, irrefutably traceable through
Exactly.
through DNA. Well, let me ask you a question. Is there any kind of reach out, support, familiarization, activity, volunteerism? Is there anything, promotion, anything that the community, there are people who are interested, such as I, in making sure, and particularly from a historical perspective, our kids, our young people need to know this. They need to see it. Not only everybody
Yes, sir.
needs to know it, see it, and be familiar with it from a historical perspective, because what we're supposed to be trying to do is to promote a harmonious future. And then if you don't know where you came from, how you gonna know where you've been or where you're going?
Absolutely.
So I think it's extremely important. So are there any ways that the community can have? I know you had an event yesterday at the Douglas, and talk about that because the exhibit is still there.
Yes, sir. So first we had an exhibit called the Enslaved People Project Selected Documents, I believe, or Selected Deeds from 1823 to 1865. And this exhibit was first at the Tubman Museum. So there were images of the deeds with excerpts of a transcription, if you will, of the information. There were also pictures of the dream team, and of us with the record. So it was a very interesting exhibit. And that exhibit ran probably a month and a half. And now the exhibit is at the Douglas Theater and it runs through October 13th. So we've had 2 exhibits so far. And during each of those exhibits, like yesterday, we had basically conversation with the public. So just a dialogue about the project, about the records, how the project came about, and what our end goals are for the project, and Q&A.
Right.
So we did that. And I think it's just great. I mean, if there's any other museum or entity that would like to host this exhibit, then, I'd be happy to connect to do that, because I think this information is so valuable that it needs to be shared.
Well, I agree with you. And it's so interesting until we have talked for over 30 minutes and we are out of time. But I just want, let me ask you a question. Give us that source for finding information about the project again, the website, eServe, you say?
It is eSearch. So I will
We can
give
post it
that
on the screen.
information, and then Miss Andrea can put it in.
Yeah, she can post it on the screen. Well, this is a call to action. I'm your host, Alex C. Habersham. You know, I don't know where that name came from, but I'm going to find out soon and have an interview. Our clerk of Superior Court, is that correct?
That is correct.
Miss Erica Woodford, who is doing a phenomenal job. And I want to publicly thank her for not only her research and endeavor to bring important historical information and document to the consuming public, as she said, you know, but I also want to thank her for her involvement in several other things. I will be at the ball, you know, and I heard you say black tie, you know, so I'll
Yes.
be black to the bone.
Get
You know,
gussied up. Come on
yeah,
down.
yeah. And I'm looking forward to it. So this is a call to action. I'm your host, Alex Havisham. Have an interview with Miss Erica Woodford. Thank you so much and have a great day.
www.makingblackpages.com